Mayo against Tipperary is on this Sunday at Croke Park in the All-Ireland semi-final. Steven Poacher, tell me what I want to hear. This is a Tipperary win, isn't it?
Shane, I would love it. I'd love to see it. I really would, because I spoke before about how passionate I thought David Power had spoke after the game, but how honest it was, Shane, and how much it was from the heart. And it's hard to beat that. When you've got a man who has trawled the county for years and years, and really in a county, Shane, as you know, that hurling was number one for a long time, and probably still is. And you listen to some of the stories that you hear about the hardships that they had in dragging players out to play development squad matches and trawling around the county in a bus picking up players and the likes of stuff that is unheard of in other counties, absolutely unheard of. And I come from a very strong footballing county myself here in Down, and you probably don't appreciate the hardships that some of these guys have had to put up with in these counties, and I have to give David huge respect, Shane, for what he's done, not just last Sunday, but what he has done in the past for Tipperary football.
Well, can I give you a story of how much football plays second fiddle in Tipperary? This would have been, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or something, when I was still playing down home. And there was one Sunday morning when there was a soccer league that used to go. We play every Sunday morning, mostly hungover. You know how these soccer leagues are, not taking that seriously. But we had the option of play sort of more or less a yearly knockout game in a local football championship, the North Tipperary Football Championship, or go play our soccer match. And the lads just decided to go play the soccer match. Now, I would have really liked Gaelic football growing up and loved it and wanted to stay playing it. But it just shows you the disinterest in a lot of places, that they'd rather go and play a soccer match that they don't take seriously than Gaelic football. So that's what you're up against in a county that is just completely hurling. Now, that particular time of the year, there was no hurling anyway. That's why the football was even taking place. But that's just to give you the idea of what David Power and co are up against.
It's interesting. I mean, you think of where they've come then, Shane, from Tipperary over the last number of years, and you can see, Shane, I remember going back to John, what's his surname?
John Evans.
John Evans. I remember John Evans' reign at Tipperary, and it was quite successful too. And John was very much into pushing the development of the county as well. And I remember they came to Newry to play down in the Division 2 game. And I remember going away from the game thinking, geez, that's not a bad side. That's not a bad side. They were well organised, they were well drilled, and you could see the football in them, Shane, and did some great performance out there. Fox was still floating about at that stage, But you go back to 2015, 2016, Tyrone, under 21 All-Ireland final, and that's obviously the current Tyrone management, Brian Dooher and
Fergal
Logan, who were in charge of the team that time, and they probably could have won that game. They probably could have won that game.
Should have won that game. Should have won it. Left it behind us.
They should have won it. There's no question about it. And that was the famous game, Shane, where there was a lot of bad press coming out of Tyrone that day. A lot of bad press, about the cynicism and the sledging and the likes of that as well. So that was hanging over Tyrone after that day. And listen, I sort of felt for Tipperary, and I think people who are probably football purists probably felt for them as well because of all that added baggage. They probably felt for them. But for me, Shane, David Power's tactics against Cork were absolutely superb. They were absolutely superb. And I was speaking to a guy the other day, actually a fellow club manager. He was just asking me about how do Dublin create that sweeper without bringing a man back. Tipp just don't make any issue about it. They just bring Fox right back. They bring him right back, Shane. And what you had in the game against Cork was you had a very, very organised zonal setup. With Brian Fox coming back as an out-and-out sweeper, he came back and played as a +1. They left 2 or 3 up at all times. And obviously when they leave the likes of Quinlivan up and Sweeney, it's a serious 2 to leave up there. But they had a really, really good organisation, Shane. A really good organisation. I spoke to you about this before in the show. How 7 tucked in, 5 tucked in, 6 tucked in. And their half-back line provided them a great energy, especially when they broke and especially when they turned the ball over. My only fear on Sunday, and I think me and you might have discussed this off air, my only fear on Sunday is that they don't have phenomenal ball carriers coming out of defence. They're not phenomenal. And that's my only fear, Shane, on Sunday, is that with Mayo's high press and Mayo's intensity and their aggression in the tackle, because Mayo are one of the best teams at pressing a team high. They are, and it's one of the reasons why they've pushed Dublin so close down the years, is they've got that physicality. And if Mayo are going to put that Tipperary defence under pressure, which they will do, a lot more than Cork will have had, and they'll have identified your number 7 as well, Shane, who's a great footballer. Keeley, is it Keeley?
Robbie Kiely, yeah.
Robbie Kelly, and Robbie Kelly had a great game. He had a great game, right? But I'm looking at it from a coach's perspective, and I'm analysing the game from an analytical point of view. He did have a great game, but he also gave a lot of ball away, Shane. And if he's coming out with the ball and he's travelling in these areas here and he's getting balls turned over, it's going to put them in trouble. And that's my only concern on Sunday for them.
Yeah, I actually remember the 2016 All-Ireland semi-final between Mayo and Tipperary, and Colm O'Shaughnessy was a cornerback. He was very young at the time. I think he was only 19, and he was one of the players where Mayo would allow him to get the ball just so they could attempt to strip him. And that is something that they're probably going to do again. And I think the flip side is Tipperary have some big targets for kickouts if they go along. Like Evan Comerford has a serious boot on him, and you've Colin O'Riordan who caught all those balls cleanly against Cork. You've Michael Quinlivan who's very good at coming out the field to collect them, and Stephen O'Brien is a big man as well. But Mayo will see that coming too, won't they?
Yeah, there's no question about it. And Mayo do have physicality, Shane. We've seen the performance that Mayo put in on the kick-out side of things against Galway. It was scary. It was scary, the intensity they put on and the press that they put on. But you're right in what you say. Evan Comerford is actually a top-class goalkeeper, a really good goalkeeper. And probably one of the things that was overlooked against Cork as well was when Tipperary got some long-range free kicks, they were calling him out of goals. And I thought that was a great piece of game management. You know, I would say the likes of Sweeney and Quinlivan are probably equally as comfortable kicking those frees. But him coming up the field, kill a minute and a half, take the sting out of the game, it's a great game management tool, Shane, you know, and it's a great advantage for them to have. So he's not only effective with his place kicks from goals, but he's also effective out the field with his place kicking. But O'Riordan is a massive plus, Shane, a massive plus. Some of the balls he fielded against Cork it was heroic stuff, absolutely heroic stuff, you know, and he's got up against 2 or 3. I think there was 2 or 3, Shane, that he actually fielded, dropped, and still managed to scramble them and catch them a second time, you know, and it's just, you know, tooth and nail stuff. And that was just like, it really, really was match winning stuff. But as you say, Mayo will have looked at that. They'll have analysed the DVDs over the last 10 days, and they'll probably be thinking to themselves, Shane, that's something that we need to hone in on and disrupt when it comes to Tipperary's restarts.
Yeah, like, I mean, in a wider sense, Tipperary have beaten Clare, a Division 2 team, 2-11 to 1-11. Needed extra time to beat a Division 4 Limerick, who had a chance to level. Now, fair enough, that's a great win over Cork, but Cork have shown mental frailties in the last couple of years, and Mayo, other than Dublin, I mean, they don't really show too many frailties in knockout games, you know, in the All-Ireland series. Obviously, they've lost Connacht games, but, you know, I mean, that's the thing, they should have the edge, Tipperary, that way.
You see, psychologically, Shane, as well, I think Mayo will come into this game in a really good place. They'll have looked at what Tipperary done to Cork, and they'll more or less, you can guarantee what's been hammered home in Mayo over the last 2 weeks is no complacency. And as you say, a team like Tipp, and I'm not taking anything away from them, they're a fine side, there's some brilliant footballers, but it's very highly unlikely that you catch another big gun, you know. And let's be honest, it was a brilliant win against Cork, an absolutely phenomenal win. But Cork were operating in the same division, Shane, and they beat Cork. Cork beat them by a point in the National League. So I think David Power's interview after, correct me if I'm wrong, I do think he said that they didn't fear Cork. That particular group of players didn't fear Cork. But if it had been Kerry, there might have been a different mindset and a different sort of approach to the game, you know, from a fear perspective. And I think Kerry would have a different approach. I don't think Kerry would have been into the game complacent either. So I think Mayo will have learned the lessons. They'll have looked at Cork beating Kerry. They'll have looked at Tipp beating Cork, and they'll say, look, we can't afford to lose this game based on complacency. And if Tipp go out and outfox them and outfight them, set themselves up in the way they did against Cork, play on the counter-attack, take their chances when it comes, they have every chance. I don't see this Mayo team, Shane, ready to beat Dublin. I think it's a side that is littered with, you know, half of the group from the what you'd probably call the nearly years, you know, with another sprinkling of that under-21 group who were beating Michael Durr in the All-Ireland final a couple of years ago. So they've mixed experience with a lot of youth. There's some brilliant footballers. There's no question about it. They've unearthed a couple of gems up front as well, but they'll probably get over the line on Sunday, but I think it's just too early for this Mayo team to beat Dublin.
Isn't it fair to say that this Mayo team, over the last 5 or 6 years, or maybe even slightly more, they tend to play at the level of their opposition? So if they play against Dublin, I mean, take last year aside, they played like something like 7 or 8 weeks, or they played most weeks in that particular period of time. But, you know, they struggled over Derry, Cork, a lot of teams that you'd expect them to, like they needed a replay against Roscommon one year and then hammered them in the replay. They tend to play at the level of their opposition, which means that maybe Tipperary have some sort of chance of this being a tight game.
The other problem that Shane that you had, and you're completely correct when you say, is that Mayo were their own worst enemies. Mayo miss a lot of chances. They create a lot of chances, but they also squander a lot of chances, and in those games that you mentioned, the Derry games, the Roscommon games, I can clearly remember the chances that they squandered. Even the famous game in Newbridge and Nowhere against Kildare that night. Kildare fully deserved their victory. Don't get me wrong, there's no question about it. But when you look back in the game, the chances that Mayo created and the goal chances that they created and didn't take, and that's something that, if you're an underdog on Sunday, Shane, what Tipp will need on Sunday is Tipp will need another good start. They'll need a good start. They'll need to be well organised. They'll need to maximise their chances. But they'll also need to hope that they're putting Mayo under enough pressure that it becomes a psychological thing there. If Mayo were to miss one and then miss two and then miss three and then miss four, a little bit of edge, a little bit of nerves. There is some young lads up there, okay, you still have the leaders like O'Shea and O'Connor and these guys, but those younger lads haven't really been at this situation yet. They haven't been at this stage yet at senior level. So, listen, and look, Tipp will come in again, Shane. Nothing to fear. Low-key, underdogs. And they've got, I'll tell you what they have. They have a serious leader in Conor Sweeney. I was so impressed with his leadership capabilities against Cork, the way he led the line. Not just on the field, Shane, but the way he spoke after the game. You can imagine him in the change rooms. I could just he's the sort of guy that you would just love as a manager, as a coach, because he's nearly like having a mini manager in the playing squad. Just how smart he is, how articulate he is. He speaks sense, he speaks with clarity, and he speaks with a lot of confidence. And when you have a leader like that, it's okay talking the talk, but he's also walking the walk on the field, and the players can see that. And I think when you've got him and Quinlivan up front, who knows, if Mayo were naive enough to set up the way they're getting Tyrone in the National League, Tipp could get chances and get a lot of them.
There's a couple of matchups that I think would probably happen here. Well, first of all, to put into context, Tipperary's three main men, Quinlivan, Sweeney and Colin O'Riordan, I think they're going to be earmarked by Mayo because they reckon Tipperary's other 12 players won't be able to beat them. And the matchups I see are Lee Keegan going on Conor Sweeney. I see Paddy Durkin going on Michael Quinlivan because he tends to play a little further out from, by and large. And then Matty Ruan, they'll hope that he can break even on Colin O'Riordan. Would you see those as the three matchups, or do you see something different?
Well, Paddy Durkin's an interesting one. Because he's given Mayo an awful lot, Shane, on the front foot. So maybe it could be a situation where they're saying to Paddy Durkin, match up on Quinlivan, but give him something to think about. Because Quinlivan, you don't want Quinlivan or Conor Sweeney worrying about going that way. You want your two marquee forwards. You want them high up the field and you want them involved in the game. You don't want them chasing someone. So if they do come up with that matchup, that could be very interesting. It could be very interesting. I'm not sure if they'll put Durkin on Quinlivan, but they could do. But one thing about it is, and I have to say this while we mention him, for me, Shane, Paddy Durkin over the last few weeks and over the last few games he's played has been absolutely brilliant. He's been sensational. I think he's up there in the top 3 or 4 footballers in the country at the minute. There's not a shadow of a doubt. If you were to pick 3 or 4 players from the semi-final, standout performers, standout players, he'd be mine from Mayo. There's no question about it.
And is there any particular aspect of Mayo's play that you think could unsettle Tipperary the most outside of the kickouts?
Well, I think one thing about Mayo is that they like to play football, Shane, on the front foot. They like to press teams high, and I'd probably go back to what I said at the start of this preview, is that I think with Mayo's pressing game against Tipperary's defenders, I'm not sure if Tipp have the quality at the back and the sort of the confidence to be able to carry the ball out under that level of pressure. And if Mayo can bring that real high energy, high intensity game, Shane, to the table, I think we're only going to have one winner on Sunday. But it'll be interesting to see what Mayo do with their +1. Fox will come out. There's no question about it. We know he's going to come out. We know he's going to sweep. So if Mayo are smart, what they'll do is they'll play a very experienced player, possibly Lee Keegan, who knows? Maybe play Lee Keegan in that role in front of Sweeney. They cannot be naive enough to leave Sweeney and Quinlivan in a 2v2 situation. And I think what you'll find on Sunday is that Mayo play with a permanent sweeper, Shane. And if we look at it, what they'll probably have is if Tipp leave 3 up, okay, what you'll probably have is you'll have your matchups, okay, and then maybe another man sweeping in these areas here, maybe a Keegan, who knows, okay. And I just think if they're smart, they'll do that. I think if they're smart, Shane, they'll do that, because Cork were naive at times, and the way they set up and how open they were, particularly in the counter attack, and you can see that very clearly with a lot of Tipperary scores 2 weeks ago.